This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogner. And also, for the first time in this past year of podcasting, we have...
Hey, I'm your other host, senior editor John Hall. Coming to you from Jersey, so there's going to be a lag. You're in Fort Collins. I'm out here on the East Coast.
We are experimenting with this kind of remote and wild podcast format. But
it's like how
55.
Marconi was in the beginning. Yeah.
I'm sending you messages on the back end via teletype. Yeah, we're inventing a whole new thing here that many other podcasters figured out years ago.
Right.
But
we're already off to a great start. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, episode 55 of the podcast. We started this just about a year ago, last October, and here we are. For this episode of the podcast, we thought we'd do something that we've never done before, and that's have John and me both appear on the same podcast at the same time, but then also run through something that we are really excited about, which is our 2018 Best in Beer issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. First, before we get into that, I just want to say that this episode of the podcast is sponsored in part by the Breckenridge Big Beers Festival up in January in Breckenridge, Colorado. Where Big Beers is a big favorite of ours. We go every year. John, you're involved in Big Beers, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm on the board of directors, actually. I've been going for, I don't know how many years now, 5 or 6. But yeah, it's one of the best festivals going. And I'd say that even if I wasn't involved on the board. It's always a lot of fun to go out into the mountains and hang out with the brewers. And the beers are of extraordinary strength, and brewers always bring their best. And it's always just it's a fun weekend.
Fantastic. I hope you will join us at Big Beers this year. You can find your tickets online. They are on sale now. Let's hop into it. So this is our Best in Beer episode of the podcast. The issue, our annual Best in Beer issue, is on its way to subscribers right now, should be arriving in everybody's mailboxes if it hasn't already. And we have just on today, on Friday, when this podcast goes live, made the digital issue live in the app and emailed out to subscribers. And so hopefully you all have it to follow along with at home. If you don't, then ask yourself, why do I not subscribe to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine?
Yeah,
because
I'm pretty sure
right, John, they should.
I finish pretty much every episode by saying, please, please, please subscribe to the magazine. So if people aren't doing it, it just means that they're not listening.
Well, that's true. You need to click the subscribe button for this podcast on your favorite podcast client, and you need to go to beerandbrewing.com and subscribe to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine if you don't already. But of course, we're going to assume that you do because you're listening and you care about what we do and you care about independent journalism here in the craft beer space. Speaking of that, our business is completely independent. It's something we don't talk about very often, but we are owner-owned and operated. The three primary owners of our business are my partner, John Bolton, Hayden Strauss, and me. And, there's no outside publishing company. It is just our labor of love and our little company here that publishes this magazine. So when you support us, you are supporting independence in the same way that we support independence in the craft beer space. Let's get into a little bit of methodology about what we do for this Best in Beer issue. Our approach to best is to get the broadest and most diverse approach to this that we possibly can. So for our Best in Beer issue, we look at three things. We look at best lists from some trusted writers and critics that are friends of ours that contribute to the magazine. We look to our readers, those folks that read the magazine and that read our several times a week email list. And if you don't subscribe to our weekly emails, please also do that at beerandbrewing.com.
So many subscriptions.
So many ways to stay in touch with all the awesome things that we do. How else are they going to learn about all the great stories that you've written, John?
Yeah.
So on this email list, we've got, something like 70,000 people that get it, several times a week. And we send out this reader's survey opportunity to them. They hop onto SurveyMonkey or Typeform or whatever it is that we use and fill out an exceedingly long survey that's highly in depth, asking them about all of these different categories that we are interested in. In doing that, we take some very specific steps. Number one, all of our entries for things like our best beers are text fields. We don't believe in moving the needle in favor of any one particular brewery or brand, and so we don't give you a number of selections to choose from. You have to enter that in. Well, that creates an immense amount of work for us on the back end to figure out when people give us answers that don't seem to make any kind of sense, or they misspell things or whatnot. But the integrity of that data and what readers are trying to say, and not putting our finger on the scale in any kind of way is a pretty big deal for us. So that's our reader survey. The last part of it is our editor's picks. Because this is our magazine and we get to make the rules. We give ourselves 18 spots for 2018 to choose between John and me. And with some feedback and input from some of our critics as well, what we think the magazine is going to stand by as the 18 best, most interesting, or most noteworthy beers of 2018. So we're going to go through some of the highlights on this podcast, starting with our best beers of 2018 as selected by our readers and our readers' choice. So John, do you have that list in front of you?
I do.
Why don't you start us off, because I've been talking a lot, and start counting down some of the 50 best beers of 2018.
Sure. Starting with number 50, it's out actually by you in Fort Collins, Odell's Mercenary. And then Rogue Dead Guy at 49. Odell makes it again at 48 with IPA. And at 47, we have Victory's Prima Pils. 46 is the Alchemist Focal Banger. And then number 45 is Firestone Walker's Luponic Distortion IPA. I don't know which number that is, or if that's just all of them.
I think we probably wrapped all of them up into one, since it's one brand, but yeah.
Okay.
At 44, we have Three Floyd's Zombie Dust Pale Ale. 43, we have Fathead's Headhunter IPA. 42 is Dogfish Head 60-Minute IPA. 41, Russian River Blind Pig IPA. And at 40, Brasserie d'Orval.
That's a great beer.
Only at 40.
I know. That's, well, there's still a lot of really great beer here, because at 39, it's Maine Beer Company's Lunch IPA. Firestone Walker's back again at 38 with Union Jack IPA. North Coast shows up with Old Rasputin Stout at 37. And then at 36 is Left Hand's Nitro Milk Stout. And 35 is Bell's Hop Slam Double IPA, or Imperial IPA. I guess that we have the IIPA there.
34, a new entry on the list, Sierra Nevada Hazy Little Thing. First year brewing it and first time on the list. At 33, Firestone Walker Pivo Pils, one of my personal faves. 32, Unibrew La Fin du Monde. 31, Oscar Blues Dale's Pale Ale, a classic. New Holland Dragon's Milk Stout is number 30.
The cool thing that I like about this list is that there's so many beers that have been around for a while, but they're still notable favorites by our readers. And 29 is a great example of that, of Stone IPA. And then 28 is Sierra's Celebration. 27 is Lagunitas IPA. 26 is New Belgium's Fat Tire. And then number 25 is Lawson's Finest Liquid Sip of Sunshine IPA.
You're right. This list is full of some hipster favorites as well as some old-time mainline classics. And that's what I think keeps this really fun. At 24, Treehouse Julius IPA. 23, Toppling Goliath Pseudo Sue Pale Ale. 22, Founders Backwoods Bastard. I believe the other old bastard, Dirty Bastard, was on the list last year, and somehow people have voted Backwoods in this year. Pilsner Urquell Pilsner is at 21. And at 20, this is a funny one. Weldworks Juicy Bits IPA.
Why is that a funny one?
It's a funny one because I was actually talking to Neil Fisher of WeldWorks last week about this. I think it was the article that he wrote for us, and the fact that he shared the recipe for Juicy Bits about a year and a half, 2 years ago in the pages of Craft Beer and Brewing magazine that has led to it not only to show up on this list, but also to show up on Zymergy magazine's top 10 beers of the year too. So kind of a funny, interesting way that putting content out there and sharing a recipe and has led to that beer, which is still a pretty small beer, only brewed out here in Colorado and only sold out of the brewery or at a few select retail locations. How does that beer make a top 20 list? But there you go, there it is.
Well, at 19, it's Stone Arrogant Bastard. 18 is Brasserie DuPont's Saison DuPont. 17, Deschutes shows up with Black Butte Porter, which is its first time on this list. 16 is The Alchemist with Heady Topper. And 15 is Allagash White.
Allagash White. Gotta love that beer. At 14, Dogfish Head 90-minute IPA. 13, Cigar City High Lie IPA. 12 is Ballast Point Sculpin IPA. 11, Founders with Breakfast Stout. And at 10, Founders again with Kentucky Breakfast Stout. Good old KBS.
Yeah. 9 is Fresh Squeezed IPA from Deschutes. Number 8 is Goose Island Bourbon County Brand Stout. Number 7, Boulevard Tank 7 Farmhouse Ale. And number 6 is Founders All Day IPA. They're just running the board on this list.
They definitely have the most individual entries on this list that I was able to count. On that, as you can tell, we do not put a restriction on this list. These are our readers' answers, and so when readers tell us that they love beers like Goose Island Bourbon County, we run it as is. So that is just how the chips fall. On number 5, a old school classic of American craft beer, Samuel Adams Boston Lager. Number 4, Guinness Extra Stout. Number 3, Russian River with Pliny the Elder Imperial Pale Ale. Number 2, and this is where it really gets interesting because last year this beer was in the number 1 place, and this year it has swapped places with the number 2 beer from last year. In the number 2 spot, in a interesting upset from that number 1, number 2, Bell's Brewery Two Hearted IPA. And in the number 1 spot, John?
Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale, which I wrote about earlier this year in the magazine. You can read our ode to that up on the website. But the American classic, the beer that inspired so many brewers to get into the marketplace and so many drinkers to go against the norm. It's really nice to see this beer where it is richly deserved at the top of this list.
Cheers to Sierra Nevada for this well-deserved
that's what I'm drinking
win.
right now.
And of course, there's really no losers in that top 50 list. They're all fantastic beers. Congratulations to all of the breweries and all of the individual beers. And thank you to all of our readers who selected them again this year.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
Next up in our special Best in Beer episode is our critics lists. So we have a number of critics lists in this issue. Everyone from Stan Hieronymus to Alex Kidd of Don't Drink Beer and M. Souter of Pints and Panels, Josh Weichert, one of our regular contributors from Brew Simple, and others all contribute their best of lists of the year. But John and I both compile our own lists. And so since we're doing this podcast, I figured we'd go through some of our own personal favorites this year. John, do you want to kick this off? The first category is top 3 small breweries, 15,000 barrels or less. What's the first brewery on your list?
Is Coppertail out of Tampa, Florida. So, a lot of folks.
What'd you love about them?
It's a lot of people make the trip every year to Hunahpu for Cigar City, and I'm usually one of them. But my first stop whenever I get off the plane is going to Coppertail. Casey Hughes, who's the brewer there, was a brewer here in Jersey for a lot of years, and has always been a big fan of his beers. And the thing that I kind of love when I go down there is their flagships run the gamut. So they have the IPA, they have a porter, but then they also have a year-round triple on tap, which is not something you see all that much anymore. And I'm really kind of a fan of it. So I dig what they're doing there. And if you haven't checked them out when you've been in that part of Florida, I highly recommend it.
Fantastic. First on my list, Burial Beer Company out of Asheville, North Carolina. If you listen to the podcast, I'm sure you can flip back and listen to that episode that I recorded with those guys. But, I've been out to Asheville a number of times over the years. And the first time I went to Burial, we stopped in. It's like, oh, okay, that's cool. Beer's fine. Cool little spot, definitely a little edgy. And, we kept paying attention to get some beer here and there from them. And, just noticed over the following few years, the quality of the beer skyrocketed. Then after spending some time with them out there earlier this year when we were in Asheville in March for a Brewery Accelerator event, just some of the most awesome people that I've met in the world of beer. And so that combination of beers that just blow me away and just a fantastic philosophy around their business and the way that they brew has made them one of the most exciting breweries in the country, as far as I'm concerned. Love them.
Yeah, no, that's and they have one of the best murals on the
They do.
the
Good old
brewery as well.
chunk.
Tom Selleck. No, it's Tom Selleck hugging Sloth from the Goonies.
Oh,
It's
right. You're
yeah.
right. They made you actually put them on our best in beers list for their Billows Kolsch last year in 2017.
Yeah, it's funny. I was there a couple of years ago and hanging out with some of the brewers, and there's some other brewers from out of town who are in town as well. And we're watching the line, and everybody's lining up for Skillet and Special Skillet and all of these pastry stouts and everything. And all of the brewers were just standing in the back drinking Kolsch. And I realized, that there's so many breweries that are just making the beers that they want to drink that people aren't going to line up for. But damn if it's not delicious.
These guys make both of those. They make they make brewers beers with a pretty extensive lager program. They make pastry stouts, and they make just some beautiful, well executed hazy and flavorful IPAs. And so, yeah. Who's next on your list?
Tributary. And they're in Kittery, Maine. And so the name might not be familiar to too many folks, but the brewer certainly should be. Todd Mott, who has been brewing in New England for, forever, who used to be at the Portsmouth Brewery on the other side of the river there in New Hampshire, opened up his own spot a couple of years ago. And he's just making old school styles that are so well done. And one of the beers that he was known for back in the day before this was really a huge style was Imperial Stouts aged in barrels, and it was called Kate the Great after his wife. When he left, the brewery actually made a big deal about saying that he was taking the recipe with him, that it was his intellectual property, which is something you don't hear about all too often these days in beer. And he has renamed it as Todd the Lesser. And you can get it every autumn when it comes out. But it's a great beer, and Todd is just one of the great gentlemen of brewing and one of the smartest brewing minds that's been around in this area, for more than a generation. And so anytime you're driving up from Boston to Portland on 95, it's worth making a stop at his place.
Cheers to that.
Yeah. What's on yours?
Pint House Pizza out of Austin, Texas. If you listened a couple weeks ago, I did a wonderful podcast with, or I should say, I did a podcast with the wonderful Joe Morfeld.
Good self-correction there.
Trust me, it's all the folks I'm talking to. It has nothing to do with me. It was a interesting timing in that we finished the podcast, posted it the next day. The next morning, I get a text from Joe. He's like, hey, he sends me a picture of him winning the Alpha King Challenge. so it felt really good to get that up there and out when we did. And then the next day at the GABF awards ceremony, he won, I think, a gold medal for training binds. And so Pint House Pizza, all the beers they made. We went down and visited Austin for a Brewers Retreat event in May of this year and spent some time hanging with Joe and the crew. Tasting through all of their beers, just such spectacular work. And what I really love about them is their beers taste like them. There's a character, there's a quality and a baseline quality to all of it that they do. But then they've built, they just have a specific flavor profile that fits where they are, fits their location, fits what you expect from this kind of place. And so it's easy to think, oh, it's a pizza joint then with a brewery and just kind of write it off. But man, Pint House Pizza is crushing it these days. So they're the next one on my list. How about yours?
Chuckanut. So anybody who listens to the episodes when I'm hosting will know that I'll try any beer that's put in front of me, but I really appreciate the subtlety and the skill that goes into making well-crafted lagers and pilsners. And when you're up in Bellingham, Washington, and I had the opportunity to visit there earlier this year, Will Kemper has been making fantastic lagers in the U.S. for more than a generation now at this point. And at his brewery there that he runs with his wife Mari, they have just a multitude of lagers on at any given time, and the skill and the flavor and just the passion that goes into each batch makes me wish that I lived closer. And so I'm encouraging everybody, if you love lagers, definitely seek it out. And it's kind of fun up in the Pacific Northwest as well, where hops are definitely ruling everything around the drinking space. So it's nice, a little respite now and again to go in there and have something where there is a hop bite to it, but it's not going to bang you over the head.
No, I hear you. Lagers figure heavily into my list, and that's one of the reasons that the next brewery is on mine, Alvarado Street Brewery out of Monterey and Salinas, California. Again, another one that I podcasted with JC, one of the founders of the brewery, late last year. Went out and visited them, saw their lager tanks. They're known for everything from kettle sours to hazy IPAs, or should I say expressive yeast-forward IPAs, if we're using his language for it. But lagers are a very core component of what they do as well, and they brew them for themselves. And, all around, it makes for a fantastic, well-rounded brewery. They just this year finally launched beers under their Yeast of Eden brand for wild and spontaneous beers. And so those that I've tasted so far are fantastic too. Alvarado Street is the last on my list of top 3 small breweries, 15,000 barrels or less. So let's talk about top regional or national brewery, John. What is yours this year?
It's Sun King out of Indianapolis. I got to know these guys years ago when I was a kid reporter out at the Indianapolis Star, like 20 years ago now, it seems like at this point. And these guys were just getting started, and I got to meet the brewers when they were working at another place at the late night shift, and it's been amazing to watch them grow. And year after year after year, they're continuously racking up medals. They're moving into new space. They've opened up a couple of different locations throughout Indiana. They've become one of the larger regional players by mostly following the new Glarus model as well, by mostly staying in Indianapolis or Indiana itself. And by doing that, they've really been able to corner the market, grow quite a bit, and establish themselves as not only makers of great beers like a wee heavy and a cream ale, but some of the more interesting and thoughtful barrel-aged beers that I've had in quite some time, and certainly in the U.S.
Definitely agree with you there, and I've had some great beers from Sun King over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
I remember Magpie Muckle is when they won a GABF medal for, and they sent us some of that fantastic, weird, different, and but thoroughly satisfying beer.
Yeah. What's your top brewery?
Mine, it's the brewery that actually I'm drinking a glass of their beer right now. Live Oak Brewing out of Austin, Texas. It seems kind of like an easy pick for me, but I'm drinking a can of their Grodziski right now, a beer that Stan Hieronymus put on his top beers of the year in his critics list. Live Oak, we went down, and I had to do it because I think smoked beers get a bad rap. And Chip McElroy, founder of Live Oak, said something when he was giving us a tour back in May. That I think the exact quote was, "We're going to keep making smoked beers until people drink them." Last year, 2017 GABF, they showed up to GABF with 4 beers. All 4 of them were smoked beers, and it was just this beautiful statement from this brewery that makes a fantastic half and an amazing pilsner. But here they are. They're just gonna, they're a good-sized regional brewery, and they make a lot of beer, but smoked beers are their labor of love. And I mean, you gotta love a brewery that has printed cans for their Grodziski. I mean, that is just the craziest, weirdest thing ever. But got to celebrate that. And I love breweries of their size and scale that still maintain the kind of personality and the kind of we're going to do what we want to do, and we're going to do it our way, approach to brewing. And so cheers to Live Oak for that.
Yeah.
Next category is our top 5 individual beers of the year. Do you want to get us started on that one, John?
Yeah. I'm going to catch some flack for this just because of the company that I keep elsewhere. But Carton Brewing did an Inside Our DNA. I know.
How much did Augie pay you for that mention?
Not enough. But no, here's the thing.
Your editorial integrity is shot now.
It's not. Here's the thing. This is a stand-up beer, and he gave a lot of thought to this one. And we're going to be writing about this in an upcoming issue of the magazine. But they got this huge footer, and they put an IPA in it, and they did it just like how Ballantyne's used to do it back in the day. And so what you're getting is this really throwback IPA with this really soft, subtle oak character in the background. And as they say, it's going to age really well into an American barley wine. And they do a lot of gimmick beers, and I give Augie hell for that all the time. But this was not a gimmick. This was a true homage and a really nice stand-up IPA.
All right,
and I like giving Jersey the love. But what about you?
You got to. Mine's also an IPA, and I'm going to give Portland, Oregon some love on this one with Great Notion Brewing Space Invader. I am a sucker for Galaxy hops. And Space Invader is all about the galaxy. I'm also a sucker for perfectly placed sweetness in a hazy IPA that's just ideally balanced with, a nice little bitterness and backbone, but also some malt character. And I got it. I mean, I probably drink, I've probably had 500 or 600 hazy IPAs over the past year. It's one of my favorite styles, and it's easy to get jaded on it. It's easy to get to that point where you think, okay, all of these taste the same. And then, then one of those beers comes along like Space Invader, reminds me of everything that I love about this style. Just expressive celebration of the individual, flavors within the hops, with all of those other pieces in the right place. And so, that beer actually hit me at a kind of a low point where I was getting pretty bummed about a whole series of hazy IPAs that I'd had. And, and then I sat down and tasted that when it was going through beers for our best of issue. And, it's hard to find those beers of individual character, amidst a crowded category that really stand above. And that one hit me. I was like, you know what, this is it. This is why I love this style. And this is why I love, beer in general.
Yeah. I dig it.
What's next on your list?
Well, I actually come out your way, and when we were at the WeldWorks Invitational earlier this year out in Greeley, Colorado, I had the chance to try Cerebral's Barrel-Aged Ancient Ruins, the Rocky Road edition. And it tastes.
This is a pastry stout, John.
I know it's a pastry stout.
Pastry
stout. I know it's. I'm throwing the world upside down at this point. But I really dug it. It has all of the great elements of that fantastic ice cream flavor. And I didn't have too much of it because I would have gone into a diabetic coma. But it really stands out. With the nuance of the flavors, with the skill that they put into it, and just sort of some of the creativity as well. There's a lot of these pastry stouts that come out that say, "Oh, we're trying to be, this, or we're trying to mimic this," and you kind of get it, but it's mostly just heavy-handed in the wrong way. This has just the nuance that I think the style needs, and I really love it.
Fantastic. And the bad news for everyone out there is that Sean tells me that he is never going to bottle that beer. That he just can't. So it's something you'll only be able to get on draft. So scope it out at your nearest festival or in their tap room. Yeah. Colorado is next on my list too. I mean, I live in Colorado and have a special place in my heart for Colorado, but I also try to keep my list as focused as broadly as possible. This is one exception to that. Outer Range Brewing from Frisco, Colorado, and the beer is In the Steep. This one is a hazy Citra soft IPA, and it is just a game changer for me. Absolutely love this beer. I was just up there actually in Breckenridge and Frisco this past weekend and looked for a story on Outer Range. Breakout brewer story in an upcoming issue of Craft Beer and Brewing magazine. So talked to Lee and Emily. They've been friends of ours for a little while, and couldn't be a more beautiful brewery. And their approach to making these soft and expressive IPAs is just fantastic. And so, In the Steep, that's my next one. How about yours?
My next one was Daddy-O Pilsner from Yazoo down in Nashville. We spent some time there during the Craft Brewers Conference early this year. I have family who lives down there, so I'm down there quite a bit. And they changed up their hop schedule on the beer this year, and they started using Callista and Ariana hops, and they did a special batch of this Daddy-O Pilsner just for the Craft Brewers Conference this year, and it was such a hit that they're actually changing it up full time, and it's going to be standing out, or it's going to be on shelves and on tap fairly soon for everybody to drink. But in a sea of Pilsners, this one stood head and shoulders above the rest for me this year.
Awesome. Yeah, I had that beer. It was fantastic. Next on my list, Monkish, Glamour, Glitters, and Gold. And, when I say this, it really could be just about any Monkish IPA or double IPA or triple IPA that I've had this year. They are one of those where I don't think I've had any of them that I would feel are any less than absolutely spectacular. But, Henry came out to Henry and Adriana came out to our retreat in Austin this past year. And we get to do selfish things like invite awesome brewers whose beer we love to come to do events with us, and we're thoroughly ecstatic and excited when they say yes. It was really fun to get to hang with them. It was really fun to get to drink a bunch of their beers and talk with them about how they make it. Obviously, that episode of the podcast is out here, and I hope you go back and listen to it if you haven't already. But every time I try to think, oh, you know what? Like, this beer can't be worth what traders are out there trading it for. One of my beer nerd trader friends will pull a can in, and it's like, hey, I just got some Monkish in. Let's drink it, because this is the life that I live, right? And so we pop open some Monkish, and I'm always reminded that it is so perfectly balanced, and it's so clear in its intention. It does exactly what they try to do, which is capture all of those hops flavors and celebrate that whole idea of hops flavor everywhere, from the bitterness to that to the fruit and citrus and tropical flavors that come with that. And so there's an intensity, but also a subtlety and nuance and sophistication to to their hazy IPAs that I really think is kind of unmatched out there in the world of brewing.
Awesome. I agree with you. I'm a big fan of their beers as well. Staying in California, so earlier this year, before it even had a name, I was hanging out with Jeffers Richardson from Firestone's Barrel Works, and he brought this beer that they did a collaboration with a local winery, and it's a hybrid of a Pinot Noir and a Blonde Ale that they did in the champagne style, and everybody who had it at the moment was just stunned into silence. It was that remarkable. It didn't have a name at that point, but it does now. It's called Feral Brute, and apparently all of us that day who had it for the first time were not alone, because it was awarded gold at GABF this year in the barrel category. So congratulations to those guys, and if you're able to get a bottle of this Feral Brute, it's worth whatever people are asking you to pay for it, because it is just a standout knockout beer.
You sound so smart for having picked that ahead of the GABF judges, John. Well done.
It's broken clock is right twice a day. So,
and but this issue, the Best in Beer issue, was put to bed actually the week before GABF, before any of these awards were out. And so, I would say in 2017 I did the same thing, and had a beer in my editor's picks for Best of 2017 that later won, I think, a GABF silver, and I was subtly patting myself on the back for that.
Silver's nice. Silver's nice. I mean, it's not gold, but silver's nice.
It's not gold. You're right. In fact, the next beer on my list is from that same brewery, Side Project Brewing. Four Candles is next on my list. Last year, I think it was, I can't remember it was Blended 2017. That was on my list that I think they won a silver for. Of course, I'm going to have to fact check myself. Maybe it wasn't a silver, but I believe that's what it was. Anyway, we were out at the Firestone Walker Invitational in Paso Robles in June of this past year, and it was hot as hell, because it's always hot as hell at the Firestone Invitational. The last day on the earth that you'd want to be drinking big, hefty, barrel-aged stouts. But you know what? I went back for multiple pours of Four Candles, which was great, because they just kept them coming. There was something about this still uncarbonated stout that just struck me as this beautiful approach to blending, with multiple layers of interesting character, from burnt molasses to anise, but also just a perfectly appointed sweetness, nice roast and bitterness. I mean, it was just all of those pieces that came together perfectly, and so on a day where we also drank beers like Beer Barrel Time and one of the derivations that Corey had brought, it was still Four Candles that stood out to me. I still think about drinking that amazing stout on that horribly hot day. But yeah, there it is. What's next on your list?
I needed another IPA on there, because hops rule everything around us. And Reuben's Brews Bits and Bobs out of Seattle. I spent an afternoon there earlier this year, and had quite a few glasses of this. And it's an always changing IPA, but you can just, no matter what the recipe is, when you have it, you can be guaranteed that it's going to be of the finest quality. Adam, who runs that brewery, is just one of the more thoughtful home brewers turned pro that I've had the good fortune to meet and interview and talk with over the years. And this IPA is just a perfect example of his tinkering spirit that comes with putting together great recipes. So go check it out if you're in the greater Pacific Northwest area.
Couldn't agree more. Love Reuben's Brews. Adam's amazing. We had some Triple Crush at GABF this year that was one of those beers that changed my mind about triple IPAs. You get these ideas, lodged in your head like, triple IPAs. Who wants to drink that? And then you have a beer like Triple Crush from Reuben's. You're like, oh yeah, this is why this is amazing and why people love this kind of beer. And, I love that he could shake me out of my curmudgeonly refusal to like and accept triple IPAs, and change my mind on that. So yeah, cheers to Reuben. Next up on my list, Highland Park Brewery, Eddie Pills. This is another one that we tasted at the Firestone Walker Invitational. One of the things I love about Highland Park is they play both in the traditional Pilsner game and a contemporary Pilsner game. Eddie Pills falls in the contemporary category. I believe this one was dry hopped with Nelson Sauvin, a hop that I absolutely love, that I know is polarizing out there. Some people hate Nelson Sauvin, some people love it. I fall in that love category because I just love the way it kind of dries out even less dry beers with this, kind of white wine character to it and a little bit of grassiness and a little bit of herbalness. This Pilsner, one of the reasons I loved it is that it captures that hop character in such a beautiful way, but it never loses sight of the fact that it's a Pilsner. I think it's easy for these kinds of progressively hopped Pilsners to kind of just veer straight off into India Pale Lager territory and become their own thing. But they cared as much about making sure that the Pilsner character of the beer is there as they do that the hops character is there. And, that absolutely just does it for me. So yeah, Highland Park Brewery.
Yeah, it's a great beer.
Do you have any honorable mentions? Any honorable mentions, John?
No, I always had a space on my page in the magazine, but you have a couple.
I threw a few in there just for fun. A couple that I had that I thought were interesting. Edmund's Oast Brewing Company, Mexican Cake IPA. I had to put that one in there because, when I saw Mexican Cake IPA on the label, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be the worst beer I've ever had. And then, you do this enough, you drink enough beer, you can kind of make some judgments that most of the time are correct. This time I was just completely off pace. Like that beer was actually really interesting for a pastry IPA, in a style that I am generally not that interested in, but I thought they executed very well and was happy to try it. Bierstadt Lagerhaus Slow Pour Pills. I think that's probably going to be on my list as a Colorado guy from here until eternity, so I don't need to explain that one. Perennial. Barrel Aged Abraxas and Barrel Aged Sump are a couple. Every year we get them. Thank you, Katie and Phil and Emily at Perennial for sending us samples of those beers. In particular, every year I wait for something to slip up, and every year they are still some of the best stouts that I ever put in my mouth. Just so beautifully executed, so cohesive in their construction, with no pieces out of place and just a perfectly smooth flavor and flow experience from the first sip to the ending lingering aftertaste. Barrel Aged Abraxas and Barrel Aged Sump, both amazing beers. Also on that Barrel Aged Stout category, Weldworks Vanilla and Coconut Media Noches, spectacular barrel aged beers, and of course I'm lucky to be local and have access to them fairly frequently. So those are the nice things that I get to enjoy. Civil Life Brewing Company American Brown Ale, just because it can't all be hazy IPAs and big stouts and whatnot. Man, that brown ale. They sent us some earlier this year. Actually, I should say I went there about 2 years ago when we were in St. Louis, and John Bolton and I, our craft beer and brewing co-founder, and I, after visiting the side project cellar and Four Hands and Schlafly and a few other places, ended up at Civil Life and thought, we'll just pop in and have a round. And one round ended up with 2 rounds, which ended up with 2 or 3 more rounds. Us playing darts in the back and enjoying some fantastic cask ales and traditional, mild ale styles. And, it's just a beautiful way to spend an evening and a beautiful way to enjoy beer that is not hipster beer by any stretch, but is so beautifully well made that it just kind of disappears into the back as you enjoy the experience of the people around you. And I think that's one fantastic way that craft beer can be. So, Civil Life, American
Cool.
Brown. Yeah. Let's talk about a classic beer that you will always order if it's on the menu, John.
Pilsner Urquell. I love it. It's the brewery. I mean, it's a classic brewery to begin with. It is the style, or it is the beer that created the style. That is the benchmark of the style. And since the brewery started changing it up a couple of years ago and making sure that what was coming into the U.S. was actually fresh and not light struck and not stale, anytime that I see it, especially on draft, I know that I'm going to be able to get a really just nice, easygoing glass of pills. And from the spicy saz to the biscuity bready malt in there, there's always something that's just a little fun and intriguing about that beer. It's not flashy, but it's classic and it's reliable. What was yours?
Absolutely. Saison DuPont.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, this one's, I guess, is kind of an easy one too. But you know, if I'm eating out, there are very few beers that I enjoy more than Saison DuPont with a meal, because that kind of, dry and crisp yet mildly estery profile of the Saison just seems to complement anything that I'm eating, but also provide that kind of tight effervescence that cleanses the palate between sips. I mean, it is it's just a fantastic beer that pairs with just almost anything, and so that's why it's a classic that I'll always order. How about your favorite beer city, John?
Nashville. Like I mentioned earlier, I go down there a couple of times a year. We have family there. I've been going for quite a while, and the beer scene, the metro area is booming, but the beer scene especially so. And there's so many cool breweries that are popping up. There's such great live music that's happening where you can also drink local as well. You don't just have to drink Bud Long Necks as you're hanging out on Broadway anymore, which is really kind of great. And Yazoo is certainly fueling that. But every time I go down there, there's 2 or 3 new breweries that have opened up in the area, and it's fun to go exploring and see not only how the local cuisine is playing into the beers that are being made, but how the national conversation is really being boiled down and distilled into a Nashville original, with a lot of places like Bearded Irish, like Cezanne's, and so many others that are popping up. So it's a great city to go and visit if you haven't before. Where do you like drinking? Where's your favorite beer city?
I'm going to keep it in the South this year, and give a shout out to Richmond, Virginia.
Oh.
Made a trip out there, and in fact, you can read my beercation story about my visit to Richmond, Virginia, in this Best in Beer issue. But you know what? I think Richmond is one of those cities that's primed for its notoriety, on par with some of the bigger beer cities in America right now. The breweries from the Vale and Triple Crossing, and now of course Stone, Licking Hole Creek, Hardywood Park, of course. They have just set this town apart. And they are brewing some fantastic beer, but have built such a beautiful beer scene. It's a fantastic place to visit, and everybody should put it on their list.
And you stayed in that general area for your favorite beer bar or beer bar that everyone should experience.
I did. I stayed there with Church Key in Washington, D.C. Maybe I've got Northern Virginia on the mind, but hey, there it is. Church Key, you know what I love about Church Key, and some of this I can give a shout out to Greg Engert, their beer director, with his philosophy about building categorizations around beers based on flavors, not necessarily styles. It's a philosophy that I have embraced, and as we've designed beer menus for beer bars like one that we owned here in Fort Collins, Tap and Handle, it's one we've taken to heart, building an idea of what beers taste like rather than historical ideas of style. And I love that Church Key's beer list is built around, again, what beers taste like, and not just expecting people to understand what style means when they say it that way. Their beer list is just absolutely phenomenal. I always look at it time to time, whether I'm in the area or not, just to see who's hot and who they're pulling in, because they're key influencers on the East Coast.
The places that I picked in this category do not have phenomenal beer lists. I just want to point that out right off the bat. But there are 2 bars that I think everybody should experience at least once in your life or multiple times. And the first is McSorley's on 7th in Manhattan, which is just this great old bar that you really have to experience in order to get the full dose of it. They only serve 2 beers, light and dark. and neither of them are very good, but that's not the point. The point is to really soak in the atmosphere when you're there, and you get the cheese and onion plate with a sleeve of saltine crackers as well to help you wash down the beer, and it's a great way to while away a Tuesday afternoon.
I hear you. I lived in New York City for 10 years, and we'd pop into McSorley's every now and then. And, yeah, the beer wasn't amazing, but God, it was a fantastic experience every time.
Yeah, yeah. And the other place that I picked is actually the Brown Bottle, which is in the old Schlitz Brewery in Milwaukee. And they pay homage to that. It was the old, I think, executive dining room or workman's room or something like that. But it's a wood-paneled bar, and Russ Klitsch from Lakefront, the brewery there in Milwaukee, introduced me to this place a couple years ago. And you drink drink out of some old Pilsner glasses of Schlitz that's now made by Miller out there, and you look at some of the old pictures on the walls from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and it's an era of a bygone era of beer, but it's a throwback in time with a throwback beer, and it's a fun experience if you have a chance to go and check that out. And on the gadgets, we both actually have the same love for the item that you mentioned in your column.
I do, and on that note, I got to open another beer. Unfortunately,
Okay.
it's a can, and so I can't use my item there. But I got to keep the liquid flowing here. No, that item is something that Mark Carpenter, the former brewmaster of Anchor Brewing, gave to me while we were out there a few years ago, and it's one of their titanium bottle openers. Now, you can't really be a beer fan without having a bottle opener. It's pretty crucial to this whole thing, right?
Yes.
But also as a, semi-fashion conscious, but also like way OCD kind of person, like I want to have a bottle opener on me that also is minimal and as flattering in my pocket as it possibly can be, and also light. And man, that titanium bottle opener from Anchor Steam, it's one of the greatest things that they've ever designed.
Hands down.
It is it is incredibly strong. The titanium can rip through wax like nobody's business. It sits lightly. It's just about the size of a key, so it doesn't get too big in your pocket. It's just about perfect.
And it's the shape of the famous Anchor bottle. So,
it is.
It's a fun. Yeah, I've been carrying it for, gosh, I don't know, 15 years now or so, and it's just. I don't know what I'd do without it, actually.
People call me crazy, but I obsess on this one item so much. It is really weird just how OCD and obsessive I get about that. How about a beer glass? What glass do you find using the most?
I have two, actually, and there's nothing all that exciting about them, but it's a Rastal Tulip that I got at Savor back in 2014 when it was here in New York, and just by nature of it being in the front of my cabinet from frequent use, it's sort of become my go-to beer glass, and I like the shape of the tulip to begin with. It has some the 2-ounce mark on it, and then it also has the 10-ounce mark on it as well. So if I'm doing tastings or if I just want to pour properly, it's nice to have those marks on there. But it's utilitarian, and it's just my nature of the rotation of my glassware. But it is definitely my go-to these days. What about for you?
So we're in bonus content area for you right now, and that does not appear in the magazine.
I know.
So, the listeners to the podcast get special extra content there.
Yeah. Don't forget to subscribe. Yeah.
Oh goodness, yeah, nonstop shilling all the time. No, one of my favorite glasses is a variation of the glass that I'm drinking out of right now. Right now, I'm drinking out of a Rastal Harmony Stemless. I think it's like a 45 centiliter, but. One of my favorites is a Rastal Harmony 35 glass that the folks at True Brewing gave to us. It's a wine glass, but it's got that beautiful little angled base to it and a nice kind of modern, bowl with straight sides, and just love it. It's got a nice little thin lip. I get really nerdy about my beer glasses, and having nice thin lips without a kind of large rolled area on it, having nice thin walls of the glass. Those are all things that I highly prize, and so I love drinking out of this one. It's also not as fragile as some of the Spiegelau's or Zalto or something along those lines, and so I can stand up to my washing regimen or my put it in the dishwasher because I'm too lazy to hand wash it kind of regimen.
Yeah.
Another beer glass I drink a lot of is the Libby Unique glass. That one, I think, was one that we picked up on down at Modern Times in San Diego, and then found, oh wait, Modern Times, Ballast Point, a lot of, it's a very popular glass in San Diego, and I found it to just be really fun one to drink all sorts of styles out of, from IPAs to Belgian beers and whatnot, because it's almost like a tulip with a focused kind of cylindrical nose off of it to kind of hold that aroma and push it up towards your nose as you take a sip. So
Yeah.
love that Libby Unique glass.
Very cool.
All right, as I take another sip. Next up, that is our critics lists. Again, for more, we have similar lists from Stan Hieronymus, Alex Kidd, M. Sauter, Josh Weichert, etc. Check out the magazine for all of their lists. We're not going to get into that just for out of time right now. Next, we're going to go back to a reader's choice list. Who brews it best? This was really fun when we came up with this category a couple years ago when we were ideating on our best in beer issue. I wanted to find a way to talk about breweries that were into smaller niches. And when you talk about like top 50 breweries, you're going to get the biggest breweries that are most distributed in the United States. You're not necessarily going to catch on to some nuance. And so we started to ask, well, hey, who's your favorite IPA brewer, and who's your favorite stout brewer, who's your favorite saison brewer, who's your favorite sour or wild ale brewer? And you know what? This is where our readers restored my faith in beer. So for every one of you that says, oh my gosh, Too Hard, that's not the best beer in the world, I can't believe they voted that way, or Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, I can't believe, this is the list for you. So we're going to run through some of the categories here. John, do you want to talk about our readers' 5 favorite? And I should say, in the magazine, each of these lists is a list of 20 breweries. We're going to tell you the top 5, just so we can keep moving through this, and then you have an incentive to go read the magazine issue to see all the rest, don't you?
Yes.
So favorite American IPA brewers.
Favorite American IPA brewers. Number 5, Dogfish Head. Number 4, Bell's. Number 3, Sierra Nevada. Number 2, Russian River. And number 1, according to our readers, is Stone. Hazy IPA brewer, Jamie?
Yeah, favorite hazy IPA brewers. This is the first year that we've had this category. And so, of course, all of these entries are new, but an interestingly nuanced list with some big guys and some small guys, and a lot of regional variation in here. Number 5, WeldWorks. Number 4, Sierra Nevada, that hazy little thing, getting a lot of traction for them. Couldn't have bigger and smaller breweries right next to each other there, huh? Number 3, The Alchemist. There you go. Classic in the hazy category. Number 2, Trillium out of Boston. And number 1, Treehouse.
Also out of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
When we jump over to Saisons, number 5 is Hill Farmstead. Number 4 is Funkworks. Number 3, Omegang. Number 2, Boulevard. And to nobody's surprise, at number 1, Brasserie DuPont.
Some things are consistent year over year, and DuPont at number 1 and Boulevard number 2, both number 1 and 2 last year as well. Fantastic choices. And like I said, they kind of restore your faith in beer humanity when you see such smart choices. Our list for favorite Belgian or Belgian style brewer, interestingly enough, is exactly the same as the 2017 list. Number 5 spot, St. Bernardus. Number 4 spot, West Vleteren. Number 3 spot, Allagash. Number 2 spot, Chimay. And Omegang in the number 1 spot. Tell us about favorite sour or wild ale brewer, John.
So number 5, Wicked Weed. Number 4, Crooked Stave. Number 3, Jolly Pumpkin. Number 2, Jester King. And of course, number 1, Cantillon. And again, these are, these shouldn't come as a surprise. These breweries do what they do really well and get the recognition that they deserve from not only us, but certainly the readers as well. Stout and Porter is up next.
Stout and Porter in the number 5 spot, Goose Island. In the number 4 spot, North Coast. Good old Rasputin is driving that one. Left Hand, of course, with their milk stout is in number 3. Guinness Stout has put Guinness in that number 2 spot. And to no one's surprise, who heard our top 50 brewers lists, Founders is in that number 1 spot for favorite stout or porter.
As we jump over to Pale Ale, Deschutes came in at number 5, Trillium at number 4. Number 3 is Three Floyds. Number 2 is Oscar Blues. And again, no surprise. Number one, Sierra Nevada.
Sierra Nevada, of course, the kings of the pale ale right there. Most of those actually 1, 2, and 3 spots all carryovers also from 2017. So a lot of consistency in that category. Let's talk about favorite lager brewer, our last category on this one. Number 5 spot, Youngling, the biggest craft brewer in America.
How did you pronounce that?
Youngling?
I always thought it was Yingling.
Yingling?
Yeah.
Maybe
I don't know. We're going to have to get a ruling on this at some point.
Is that with your Pennsylvania, New Jersey accent, or
I don't have a Pennsylvania accent, but
which honestly was probably the correct one, given the difference with my own accent. So Yingling, in the number 5 spot, in the number 4 spot, a brewery that's just almost as large as they are, Bierstadt Lagerhaus.
Not quite.
Maybe not quite. Number 3 spot, Firestone Walker, good old Pivo and Firestone Lager. Number 2 spot, Jack's Abbey from Massachusetts. And in the number 1 spot, another Massachusetts brewery, or at least Boston-founded brewery, Samuel Adams.
Yeah.
All right, let's pivot now.
All right.
Now that we've gone through those readers' choices, let's talk about what I would call the biggest and most important of our categories in the Best in Beer issue, and that's our editor's picks for the best 18 beers of 2018.
Yeah, this was really hard, and also a lot of fun to put together. It's one of the perks of the job is being able to talk with great brewers, but also drink the beers that are being made. And out of the hundreds and hundreds of beers that we have every year, there's always some that stand out among the rest.
Hundreds and hundreds of beers, John?
Oh yeah, are you thousands of thousands?
I use Untapped for one reason, and that is not to rate beers, because I don't rate any beers on Untapped, but I use it because they have a fantastic pool of data, and it's very easy to keep track of what I drink, where I drank it, and what the context was around that. And so every year when we're compiling our best of issue, I pay the money to get the advanced membership or whatever, which allows me to download the spreadsheet and go look through all of it. And I average around 2,000 different beers per year. Something I'm not necessarily proud of. My doctors have probably advised me to do something different than that, but it is a pretty significant number of beers, and I think about 70% of those are unique beers. But we take this seriously. We try to taste a lot of beers. And a lot of those are small samples of 1 or 2 ounces and not entire beers, because if I averaged an actual 6 pints of beer per day, I'd be dead by now.
Yeah.
But our method on this is the highly scientific. John and I get together. We ask some of our critics and writers to suggest beers that they thought were some of theirs. We compile a giant list. It ends up looking like a wall, in one of those cop movies where they're trying to track the serial killers, and they have strings that go from one place to another to try to link these together to create some master list that makes sense of all these best beers. It's because we're looking for a whole bunch of different categories, broad representation, yada yada yada, and then we argue about it, and we have some great meetings around that. Huh?
It's a fun conversation.
We argue, but that's what we're here for, to earnestly and authentically suggest, beers that we believe should be, and then we advocate for them, just like judging a medal round of GABF, where there are some things you want to advocate for and you push them forward, and there are other things where you allow other judges to get their say in, and at the end of the day, I think we've got a pretty damn good list, and I'm willing to stand behind it. So why don't you start us off with one of your picks for editor's picks for best 18?
Sure, and we don't number these, by the way. These are just great beers that we've had this year.
We hate stack ranking anything. I guess since this is our podcast, I can put out my philosophy on this. I hate trying to force rank stuff into number 1, number 2, number 3, screw that.
Yeah.
My philosophy on this is there are a lot of bests. there are a lot of bests for different reasons. There are a lot of bests because there are different criteria that you can argue that something might be equally valuable, interesting, or best. And so in that sense, these are not in any kind of order. There's not anything. These are the 18 best that an 18 best most interesting, most important interesting stories or influential this year as we've selected them. And so there it is. Start us off, John.
So it is a collaboration between Sierra Nevada and Weihenstephan, and this was Brau Pact, which is a Hefeweizen that they made earlier this year. It's a limited offering, but man, I'll tell you, it is the best of both breweries' traditions. Weihenstephan knows how to make a Hefeweizen better than anybody else, being the oldest brewery in the world, and Sierra Nevada obviously knows what they're doing with hops when it comes to how they have changed the American beer landscape. And so these two great breweries getting together, this beer is absolutely a marvel, and I think everybody who's had it hopes that it becomes a regular offering, because I think people would stock up on this quite a bit if it was around year round. And if you still see it on shelves, go grab it. If you were lucky enough to have it first time around, I'm sure you'll agree with this one.
It's still on shelves out here in Colorado, John, and I can tell you that because I had to buy a 6-pack of it for the photo prop a couple of weeks ago, and I was able to find one here. And the remainder is in my fridge, where I've slowly been drinking it because it is such a fantastic and beautiful beer.
Well, the next beer is actually close to home for you.
It is New Belgium, Lawfully 2018. This is a big year for New Belgium and their sour beer program. They started, in 2017, kind of moving from their old philosophy of let's make sour accessible to everybody, which they're still doing in a considerable way, to let's express some of these foeder-based sour beers in the most interesting and special way that we can, and that's taking it back to kind of bottle conditioned, corked and crowned. But they do that, and I think the thing that the best part about this whole thing is that they are moving back to this bottle conditioned, unpasteurized, corked and caged format, and they're doing it having learned everything that they possibly could about how to brew and how to package sour beer. And so now, Lawfully, this is a beer that I've taken for granted for years. Let's just put it all out there. At my 40th birthday a few years ago, a buddy of mine brought a 4-year vertical of Lawfully, and we drank through it. But it was a whole group of beer nerds, and I don't think we even finished all the bottles because it was just something you take for granted. Lawfully is everywhere out here. This new Lawfully is something that no one should take for granted. It is beautiful, and what I loved about this one, I don't want to spoil anything because we have a review of it coming up in our upcoming wood-aged beer issue. But our blind panel, when they tasted it, was reminded that malt matters. That it's so easy as the trend has kind of gone in sour beer toward golden sours, towards these light beers that are acidity-driven and fruit-driven. It's so easy to forget that malt component can add so much interest and flavor and layers of complexity in a sour beer. And this edition of Lawfully captures all of that, and it captures it in just this spectacular way.
What's next on the list?
Next on the list, it is the Answer Brew Pub 3 Scoops. This is a controversial pick.
How so?
There are some out there in the world of brewing who would, might call us crazy for making this pick. But when I was out in Richmond, I made a stop by. And, I will, again, also admit to not being the largest fan of overly fruited, unre-fermented fruit in beer with crowlers or cans that may explode. Or not explode, I'm sorry, seep at the seams. So when it comes to this level of fruit in beer, I've been a critic of it in the past because I don't love beers that lose sight of the fact that they're beer. And then I popped into the Answer, made a visit, tasted a whole bunch of their beers, and when you have one of these styles of beer made by such an important brewery in the development of that style of beer, it's easier to understand why people like it. And that was the case for me. Like when you taste not just, the fact that they're putting a bunch of these flavors into a beer, but the way that they've balanced those flavors, the way that they've built a beer to kind of support that, and the way that, and the quality of those flavors and how that all comes together, it just creates something that is greater than the sum of its parts. And that was it, with 3 scoops for me, in this kind of highly fruit forward kind of, slightly sour tart, Berliner Weiss kind of approach, to beer that the Answer is putting out there. And so there you go. 3 scoops, controversial choice. Some people may love it. Some people may hate it, but you can't ignore them.
Not a controversial choice, though. The next beer, you crossed the Atlantic. You went over to Europe.
We did. This is another one that made our list, not just because, again, I don't want to spoil our wood age beer issue, but you'll see the review of this beer in the score that our judges gave it in the next issue. 3 Fontainen, Oud Geuze, Cuvée Armand Gaston. This one is, we're suckers, for Oud Geuze, Lambic, Oud Creeks, and the variety of lambic and lambic blends that are out there from traditional Belgian brewers. This one is noteworthy this year. We've loved Three Fontainen for many years, but they are finally back to brewing and blending from wort and beer that they have brewed in-house. For a number of years they weren't able to brew within the brewery themselves, and they were simply blending other people's wort. Now they're back to blending beer that they're actually brewing in-house. And so, I think what that affords them, and what I say in the write-up here, is a kind of a singular focus. Some of their other blends have a kind of a broader and wider kind of approach to pulling in complexity from the different base beers. This is so beautifully citric and so intensely funky, with a perfectly placed acidity, a lot more residual sweetness than you would expect in this kind of beer that kind of balances out that funkiness. And I mean, it's absolutely spectacular. It's just a wonderful beer.
Yeah, no, it is.
And you're up next. You're going to take us into Lagerland.
Absolutely. So this is the Von Trapp Brewing Oktoberfest, and it's fun this time of year, towards the end of the year, to have an Oktoberfest on here. And there's still not a lot this time of year that come out, but the ones that do, they capture some of the spirit of it, especially if they're made here in the U.S. This one, I think we all agreed when we had it, was just it's head and shoulders above the rest. It's exactly what you want from an Oktoberfest lager. It's perfect as the weather starts to change around the country, as it starts to get a little bit cooler. It's got this nice sweetness to it, but it also just has a little bit of an assertive hop content to it. It tastes like autumn in a glass, and to me, liters of this is a perfect way to while away an afternoon, weekend afternoon in the summer, and or in autumn, I should say, as we get out of summer. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of this one, and it's great to see it on the list. If you're up in Stowe, Vermont, visiting the Alchemist or any of those other great breweries, definitely go check out what Von Trapp is doing these days. They're put in a brand new brew house, and they're really just kicking ass in the lagers that they're making in the German traditions. So
great brewery and great beer.
Yeah.
Next on our list, Fort George Brewery from Astoria, Oregon, 3-way IPA. I've had the pleasure of trying this one for the last few years, starting with the kind of the Melvin collab. I see, who was it? That was, 2016, Melvin and Barley Browns, which was a very dank West Coast IPA. In 2017, they kind of went hazy with a collab, 3-way collab between them, Great Notion, and Rubens Brews. There you go. I mean, you start talking about all-star cast right there. That was just a fantastic approach to a hazy beer. And then this year's edition is a collab with Modern Times and Holy Mountain. Modern Times now being there in Portland, Oregon, and Holy Mountain up in Seattle. What I love about this, and if you want to make this year's iteration of 3-way IPA, the 2018 edition, the collab between Holy Mountain and Modern Times and Fort George, there is the recipe. The first time we've ever had the recipe along with the beer here in our Best in Beer issue. But I was talking to Dave Coyne of Fort George Brewery a couple weeks ago at GABF, and he shed some light on the way that they brew this that absolutely blew my mind. When they're brewing this collaboration every year, they brew about 7 or 8 test batches of the beer on their 10 hectoliter pub system at Fort George. I don't know of any other collaboration in the world of collaboration beers where the three breweries involved brew 8.5 barrels of it 7 or 8 times, ship the beers around to each other to taste and figure out how they're going to iterate, and then ultimately through those 7 or 8 rounds take it up into production. I mean, you see a lot of breweries, John. I mean, you ever seen that before?
No, I have not.
It's a little bit nuts, which sounds crazy, but Three-Way IPA every year for Fort George represents 3,000 barrels of their production, which is a little bit insane. And so, that's such a huge beer, and, it's great to give them a nod for this important collaboration and what that means for all of them.
So next up on the list is the Suarez Family Brewery and their Palatine Pils. So I had a chance to get up there earlier this year, and we did a breakout brewer profile on them, and I got to hang out with Dan Suarez and hear a lot of his brewing philosophy as well. And one of the cool things about it is that he's in the Hudson Valley of New York, which has so many great breweries and a lot of places that people line up for. And he has carved out a niche for himself by not necessarily making popular styles of beer or the IPAs that people want to line up for, but instead he's making this wonderful Pilsner that made our list this year, that the brewers, we were talking about Burial earlier, the brewers are drinking what they want to drink, and this is definitely one of those beers. And I think everybody who's had the chance to drink this beer really loves the brewery's approach, the flavor for the beer, and just sort of how it takes you out of this, I don't know, chaotic circle that we can be in sometimes in beer, and just sort of forces you to sit quietly and contemplate the very nature of beer. Is that too romantic?
That is so deep, John. I'm moved. Let's go the exact opposite direction for the next beer on our editor's picks for best beers of 2018. We're going to go from Pilsner to barley wine, and not just barley wine, but a barrel-aged barley wine aged in 2 different barrels. That's Anchorage Brewing, A Deal with the Devil, Double Oaked 2017. This actually came out at the end of October of 2017, and so it does actually qualify for our beers of 2018 since our cutoff was GABF of last year. This beer, I got to tell you, the first time I had to deal with the devil was 2015, and in fact our blind panel reviewed that batch 2 release and scored it a perfect 100. It was a phenomenal beer then, and then as far as I can tell, Gabe took some of that batch that was in cognac barrels and put it into other barrels in order to kind of create this beer. This Deal with the Devil at that point scored a perfect 100. This beer is another perfect 100. I mean, it is hard to imagine a barley wine that is better, more rich, but also smooth. This is a 17% beer that does not drink hot, that just kind of captures all of those classic barley wine flavors of leather and oak, and it is just somehow, even though it remains sweet, it doesn't stay cloying. It's an interesting one because this week it's back in the news. They announced a release, I think, for the end of next week, and a price point for this next batch of A Deal with the Devil of $100 for a 375 bottle. It's created quite a bit of backlash, I guess, on the social media, but thankfully there's some good arguments for and against that price point. I just want to go on the record personally saying that I would happily pay $100 for a bottle of this beer because, as far as my estimation goes, I think it's one of the best in the world of beer and one of the best currently made.
I don't know if I'd pay that kind of money for it, but I did have it at the brewery a couple years ago when I was up there, and yeah, it's an amazing beer, and if people can get a handle on that bottle, I'm sure they won't be disappointed. What's up next?
Up next, Burial Beer Hawkbill IPA. This one comes out of our IPA issue and was nominated by our blind review panel. It was the top scoring single IPA in our IPA issue this past year, and was just a phenomenally delicious but also balanced beer. It's a hazy IPA, but it's not the sweetest and it's not the fruitiest. It was simply the most interestingly balanced beer with a lot of that fruit character and a significant amount of bitterness to kind of help play against that. And so, this beer is Burial's second year in a row appearing on the editor's picks for best of 18. I guess we have a thing for them, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're making great beer, and it's nice to see them recognized that way. And then we were talking earlier in this episode about Austin and your time down there, and Austin Beer Garden made the list as well.
You know, Amos and Swifty down at Austin Beer Garden are on to something good. It's, Austin and Texas in general is fantastic Pilsner country. These guys make three of them that are just phenomenal. Industry Pils, Velvet Revolution, and Rocket 100, each of them with a little bit of a different character, but all of them award-winning beers. And I mean, you look at Austin Beer Garden's performance in the major awards over the last 3 years, they have won Large Brew Pub of the Year 3 years straight at the Great American Beer Festival. That is a pretty amazing feat for them, and they've done it with beers of truth, with Pilsners, beers they can't hide behind, and beers that show, any kind of brewing flaw. They are masterful in their execution of these beers, and, it was such a fun time down there drinking, because we were hanging out with some of the cool kids in the brewing world, and, every single one of them, to a person, loved drinking Austin Beer Garden Brewery's, Pilsners while we were hanging out there. It's they must be getting so tired of all this winning.
Well, speaking of popular breweries, though, and ones that have mass appeal at this point, the next beer that's on our list, I was amazed to see the line that formed when we were at the WeldWorks Invitational earlier this year for this brewery that just is really seeming to starting to hit its stride right now, and I think very much deserves this next spot on our list.
It's a Bokereiter,
yes.
Piassel. Yeah, this one's it's a lambic. Now, if you read the story, the Breakout Brewer story that I wrote on Raff and his Bokereiter brand I guess it was the last issue or two ago of Craft Beer and Brewing magazine, he's got a really interesting process. He's buying lambic brewed by classic, traditional lambic brewers, Lindemans, Girardin, and de Troc, and blending those, aging that, buying that wort the day after it's cooled, after it's brewed and cooled, and then, putting it into his own oak and aging that out for, a couple of years at a time, and then doing his own fruit blends after that. But one of the things that sets him apart, he is hyper focused on using wine techniques and using especially long macerations on fruit with punch downs that help pull out more depth of character on these fruits. This Piassel using red vineyard peaches is really something spectacular. It was a tough thing for me to open one of the bottles that I had just to take the picture for the magazine and force us all to drink it right there in the office. But I took one for the team on this one because the color of this beer, as a peach beer that is that red, but also it's really incredible, but the flavor, I think, is the thing that sets this beer apart. It is a complex beer. It benefits from decanting. It's not one that's, that immediately presents to you with, this kind of intense, with this kind of, fruity, sweet flavor that one might expect. But as you really contemplate and dig into this beer, there is so much depth to it. There is so much texture and mouthfeel. I mean, it really just feels silky like a great Bordeaux wine. I mean, there is just something different and something interesting and something, sensory about the way that the beer itself even feels as you drink it. And so pretty spectacular and amazing to see interesting things happening in such a traditional world of lambic like that. You're up next, John. Tell me about the next beer.
Boy, so Society the Swindler, and we love what this brewery is doing out of San Diego. They've been really just creating some really fun, wild beers, doing remarkable things with Brettanomyces, which even in this day and age where there's so many breweries that are doing cool things with Brett, when one stands above the rest, like it really does stand tall. And the Swindler is definitely one of these. We're talking about this bright lemon characteristic. There's wonderful herb flavors, a sweet earthy vanilla note to it as well. And we talk about this splash of bracing acidity at the end of each swallow that really sort of gets you excited about the next sip that's coming. This is one of those beers that you hate it when the bottle is empty. You hate it when you get to the end of it. And if you're lucky enough to have another bottle, the temptation is there to open it up right away, as opposed to sort of stave off some of that fun for the next time around. But yeah, it's a great beer. If you're out in San Diego, there's so much hops, there's so much IPA available out there, so many pale ales available out there, that this is a really sort of a nice respite from some of that as well. So I'm a fan. I'm glad to see them on the list here.
Yeah, their last few feral releases, including the Thief, which is brewed with wine grapes, they've just really blown my socks off. Big fans of theirs, and of course, if you ever want a IPA, pupil, apprentice, coachman. I mean, they can also, fill that slot for you too. Next up on the list is another California brewery, Alvarado Street, and the beer contains no juice. This one's a fascinating one. We've got, we need to have plenty of IPAs on this list because, I mean, as you've said before, John, these are the beers that people drink, and there's no denying that it's a good 25+% of the craft beer market these days. But this beer, as a double IPA, is brewed with a Saccharomyces trois yeast, which kind of gives it an interesting, expressive take. That Sac trois pulls out some of the tropical characters of those hops, and it really creates an interesting mix of fermentation and ingredient that makes it a really fun beer to drink. I've loved so many of the Alvarado Street beers this year, everything from Vengeful Barbarian and some of their collabs, like the one they did with Moonraker. I mean, it seems like they're collabing with everybody these days. But and so there could be a lot of beers out here. It contains no juice. I think just won a bronze medal at the Great American Beer Festival, and they also shared the recipe for this beer with us for a Breakout Brewer story that we did last year. So happy to put Alvarado Street on this list.
And then the next one up, we're staying on the West Coast.
We are staying on the West Coast. This one, this beer, Fremont Brewing, Brew 2000, is our second barley wine on the list. There's a certain zeitgeist about barley wine that's been happening over the last year or two, huh? And I guess we fell victim to all of the hype out there around it. But this beer actually, I think, breaks through any idea of hype and what might be driving that. It was nominated for our editor's picks by our friend Alex, the one who encourages people to not drink beer. But let's not hold that against him. It's It is like the other barley one on the list. Just one of those where our blind reviewers, as they went through this, tasted both in the same session, and I mean they both just scored astronomically higher than every other beer in the category. It's just kind of funny when you see these beers and they're in this kind of context with other barrel aged barley wines. They just are playing at another level, and the cohesion of the flavors in these beers, the smoothness of the way that all of those these pieces fit together, that perfect amount of bitterness, that perfect amount of tobacco, toffee candy. I even got a little bit of baseball mitt, and of course some praline out of it, a little bit of that tanned leather from baseball mitts. I mean, it is a slow sipping. Contemplate while sitting next to a fire in a cold environment. I mean, just the perfect beer for that kind of scenario. And so I am really thankful that I have one more bottle of it that I'm going to enjoy at the perfect time this winter.
So I'm curious about this next one because I've had this and I really like it, and I think that this is going to raise a couple of eyebrows on our list this year from Hudson Valley.
Why do you think it's going to raise some eyebrows?
Well, it's the concept.
And we should tell them what the beer is. It is Hudson Valley Brewery Demi-Urge, which is a sour IPA.
And that's what I think might draw some eyebrows is the whole concept of a sour IPA these days. It's still, I think, a little bit on the fringe, but the ones who are making it, I think, have really sort of taken it in a fun way and made it their own. But I'm curious as to what you like about this one, Jamie.
You can ask most of my beer nerd friends, and they will tell you that there are a few beer styles that I hate on as much as sour IPA. I have turned down these beers when offered to me before, and so it was a big moment of personal growth, I think, to taste some of these beers from Hudson Valley and start to understand what it is about these beers that resonate with people. But I reached out to them and they sent us some beer. And, as I got to contemplate it in a more quiet environment, outside of that kind of, beer share, high pressure, what do you think of this place? I got to a different place on them. Number one, are they IPAs? Of course not. They're not IPAs, but who cares? I mean, at this point, IPA is simply shorthand for has hops in it. And so, I mean, right? I'm not wrong on that, am I?
No, you're not wrong at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's the brewing industry. If there's a way to attach IPA to it, we're going to call it IPA because, let's be honest, IPA sells. And so, it's simply marketing at some point there where IPA is just shorthand for has hops in it. And I'm sure we'll see Pilsner IPAs pretty soon if we haven't already. And
Well, IPLs, yeah.
yeah, we have IPLs. We've now got sour IPAs, fruited sour IPAs, and flavored sour IPAs, and who knows. Anyway, I'm not going to argue that point. We'll let history kind of sort it out, and we'll look back at this 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, and say either what the hell are we thinking, or wow, shit got a lot crazier since then, and I can't believe we were worried about that. So either one of those two things will happen, but we'll let hindsight sort that one out. This beer, and I will tell you what I thought, why I enjoyed Demiurge so much, and it's a little bit akin to why I liked Three Scoops from Answer. It's not just that they're throwing a bunch of fruit in a beer with some a kind of IPA base. It is that those combination of ingredients and the quality of that experience and the way that they're balancing these different fruit flavors and the acidity and the hops and pulling that all together into something that is still drinkable, also smooth with a very controlled and kind of, subtle and mellow acidity that just kind of rolls right in. And, it's not bracing, it's not jarring. It just becomes this natural part of the beer. And it feels, I mean, this one is a collaboration with Death and Company, the cocktail makers. It is so supremely well crafted, and all of those flavors, the quality of the flavors from the almond, the flavor they pull in to kind of echo the almond liqueur flavor of a Mai Tai, to the kind of lime and other fruit flavors. I mean, they're so beautifully balanced, and they create something that is, again, just greater than the sum of its parts. It is, there's a quality to it, but also, it pulls together in a way that a lot of other beers in the same style that I have had do not pull together. And so I think that's what sets Hudson Valley apart as brewers in this sense. How do you feel about it, John?
No, I agree. Everything that you just said about that beer, I'm 100% involved in, or 100% in agreement with. And being part of this Hudson Valley as well, it's cool to see that there's two breweries from this region that we've been covering quite a bit in the magazine over the last year or so. They're really just turning out some fantastic beers, and if you haven't had a chance to visit yet, make it part of your travel plans because there's some really cool stuff that's coming out of there.
And there's some fantastic mountain biking in the Hudson Valley if you're into that too.
Oh, absolutely.
Which I am, and have spent plenty hours of my day riding some fantastic trails up there. Can't wait to get back. Next up on the list, Epic Brewing, Big Bad Baptist. We try to make a point on this list, to not only include the hardest to find, biggest trader beers that you're going to have to trade your whole cellar for or go spend a ton of money on the secondary market for. And so there's plenty of Pilsners in that category and plenty of, more accessible IPAs. But you know what? This Big Bad Baptist is a beer that I have loved for years and years and years because it is not entirely barrel aged, but it's part barrel aged. The quality of the coffee that they use in this beer is absolutely amazing. It never ceases to, surprise me at just how, well integrated that coffee note and coffee flavors are with the beer as a whole. And the best part of it is that they just put it out there on shelves.
Yeah, you can find it. You can find it even out here in Jersey as well, which is wonderful. It's nice seeing their beers on the shelves, and this was really just one of those go-to ones that I've also just brought along and had as a beer that I can give people who say, oh, I'm not really all into darker beers, or some of the stronger stuff is a little bit intimidating. This is a super approachable beer as well. It's not heavy-handed in any one way. The true technical skill comes through, but it's also just sort of a very humble beer. As well, so I've had a fun time introducing people to partial barrel aged and some of the bigger boozier flavors through this beer as well. So it's a great teaching beer. As well as absolutely. A fun drinking beer as well.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. Two more beers on our list. The penultimate beer, Bottle Logic Brewing, Fundamental Observation. there were a lot of, we actually both had some interesting experiences with other Bottle Logic beers this year, like the Paisley Cave Complex, which is the collaboration that they've done with Great Notion that they just put out, I guess, a couple of weeks ago in a bottle release. We had some on draft at a festival earlier this year. Just kind of a remarkable beer. Bottle Logic is doing interesting things with adjunct flavors in beers for a number of years now, and some of them are super sweet and certainly geared towards that kind of beer audience. And one of the things I like about Fundamental Observation is that it's more about that rich vanilla character, and so they're in, I think, the fourth iteration of this beer, and some of them are a little more hyped than others. But I'll tell you, I think Fundamental Observation is routinely a classic release that captures all of that rustic, earthy vanilla character that you can expect in a beer, puts it and just turns that up to 11. It's a fantastic beer to sit down and enjoy, and interesting enough, the newer releases of it are not as hard to get as past are, and that is one nice thing that Bottle Logic has done. They have cranked up the bottle counts on their releases and are trying to push it to a point where it can be more accessible to people that actually want to drink it, and not just the uber beer nerds that want to trade it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, this has so many fun flavors going on with it as well. It's if you come across it on the shelves, and like you mentioned, you should be able to definitely pick up a bottle or two and save one, share one, but definitely enjoy it.
Yeah, well, some of the notes that I got: oily orange peel bitterness on the nose, an earthy vanilla note. The sip is marshmallows and Dr. Pepper. I mean, it's there's so much fun stuff going on in this beer. And then let's, for our last and final beer, but certainly not least, because again, these are not ordered.
These are not ordered, yes.
Or, I mean, you could also argue that maybe we've saved the best for last. I don't know. Kind of depends on your point of view. You make that judgment for yourself. But what's our last beer, John?
It is from Hill Farmstead, and it's Arthur, which, is just, as far as mixed fermentation beers go, mixed fermentation ales, this has that rustic complexity to it that just makes Hill Farmstead. Like this is, I think, the one beer that you can say is the personification of that celebrated brewery. And it's not maybe their most hyped beer, as it were, or the ones that people are most excited about trading these days, but it is, I think, in my mind at least, such a great go-to beer from them that it's I'm glad to see it on this list.
If I could trade one bottle of Art Batch 4 for, say, 3 cases of Arthur, I would do it in a heartbeat. The experience of Arthur, the beer nerds out there and the beer traders make a big deal out of the harder to find, smaller releases. Arthur is a gem, a beer that would be a lead in most other breweries' lineups. And for Hill Farmstead, it is their, hey, we're going to sell this 750 milliliter bottle for $10 straight out of the brewery. And we're not going to make a big deal out of it, even though it is one of the best beers, in the world of beer. It is one of my, absolute favorites. I love that tight effervescence, that slight Brett bitterness to it, a little bit of funk, solid body. Very, very light acidity, that just, gives a little bit of character. And they set the bar with this beer years and years ago, and it's a bar that most other brewers in the country are still trying to reach with their own mixed fermentation beers. So,
hands down.
Yeah.
So it's a remarkable beer.
Well, that is our top 18 editors' picks, best 18 beers of 2018. Hope you've agree or disagree or have your own points to make. If you do, reach out to us in one way or another. You can reach John either on Twitter. How do they get in touch with you, John?
I'm on Twitter at John_Hall. It's HOLL. Or Facebook, and we obviously have all of our social media channels for the magazine as well. Of Instagram, I'd love to see folks sharing some of their pictures of what they think are the best beers that they've had this year. Certainly,
that's true. We'll be rolling these out
channel.
on our Craft Beer and Brewing Instagram. That's at Craft Beer Brew. You can reach me if you want to tell me how I'm full of it. Jay Bogner at beerandbrewing.com. Hey, I love those emails, by the way. There's nothing better than somebody telling, no, you're full of shit. You're completely wrong in that. I don't know how you picked that.
The only thing better, I think, is the 3 a.m. responses that you give people.
Yeah, make sure you send me that email after 10 p.m. Mountain Time, because then you get the most interesting and colorful response, right?
That's what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, share your thoughts on our best beers of 2018, of our readers' picks for the top 50 beers of 2018, for John and Mai's critics list, for the other critics lists in the Best in Beer issue. If you haven't read it yet, go out to your newsstand and grab a copy. It'll be on there on December 30th. Or go to beerandbrewing.com and click on that subscribe button to get a subscription to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, because you want to. You should be subscribing. Yeah.
And then you're ahead of the game next year for the 2019 picks.
We have to pay John's salary somehow. So go ahead and subscribe.
I'm taking it in beer trades these days. It's a lot of fun.
Hey, that's awesome. We can pay you in beer? Fantastic. Perfect.
I've gotten that question before. People ask me do you just get paid in beer? And it's like, no. The mortgage company doesn't accept that. So I've tried.
But do they know that it's Hill Farmstead? I mean, because if they did, maybe they might take it. Jeez.
I have a poker rider. Yeah, it doesn't work with the loan company.
Well, one day we can dream of a future where our mortgage lenders accept beer in exchange for our mortgage payments. Until then, we will see you next week for another episode of the podcast where we will be back to our normal interview format with some of the leading voices in the world of brewing. Cool. Cheers.
Awesome. Cheers.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com, or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.